The morning rush hadn't yet begun when Elijah stepped onto the quiet sidewalk in front of Le Cheval Noir, one of the city's most acclaimed and exclusive restaurants. The air carried the scent of fresh baguettes from a nearby bakery, and early sunlight streaked through tall glass buildings, reflecting off the polished brass sign at the restaurant entrance. Elijah stood there for a moment, just looking. His jacket was old and worn, his jeans faded at the knees, and his shoes had lost their shine long ago. He didn't move with the hurried confidence of the city's elite. In fact, he looked like someone who had gotten off the bus 2 blocks away. But there was something grounded in his gaze, something steady. He stepped inside. The interior was elegant. Floor-to-ceiling windows, rich mahogany woodwork, crystal glassware, and soft jazz drifting through the space. It was a kind of place where reservations were made weeks in advance, and the wine list was heavier than the menu. Behind a sleek marble host stand stood Gavin, the head waiter, reviewing names on a tablet. His crisp uniform clung to him like pride, every inch of him polished and practiced. He didn't bother hiding the judgment in his eyes when he looked up at Elijah. "You lost?" Gavin asked, his smile tight. "We don't open to the public until noon." "I have a reservation," Elijah replied calmly. "Elijah Cole, table for 1. Gavin's fingers hovered over the screen. His smirk deepened as he scrolled. "Really? You sure that's not for Cheval Express down the street? That's our, let's say, more affordable option." "No mistake," Elijah said, his voice even. "I've been here before." The way he said it made Gavin pause for half a second. Then he recovered with a chuckle, glancing up and down at Elijah's clothes. "Of course. Right this way, sir." He led Elijah across the restaurant with exaggerated courtesy, making sure every table they passed caught sight of the guest in tattered clothing. As they neared a secluded corner, Gavin pointed lazily toward a table near the kitchen entrance. "This one should suit you," he said. "It's quiet, and close to the exit." Elijah didn't react. He simply nodded and took a seat. Across the floor, Lucy, a junior waitress, watched from behind the bar. She leaned over to a colleague and whispered, "That was cold. Did you hear how he spoke to him?" Her colleague shrugged. "Gavin's always like that. Only smiles for suits and watches." Meanwhile, Gavin dropped a menu on the table without a word and turned to walk away. "Excuse me," Elijah said, lifting his eyes to meet Gavin's. "Do you have the wine pairing menu?" Gavin raised a brow. "The wine list." He chuckled. "Those bottles are, well, they start at 3 figures. You sure you want to see that?" "I'm sure." With a dramatic sigh, Gavin walked off. At the kitchen entrance, he muttered under his breath to a group of waiters, "Guy probably thinks Merlot is a car brand." The others laughed, except for Omar, an older waiter who had been with the restaurant for years. Omar didn't laugh. He just watched Elijah with quiet curiosity. Back at the table, Elijah calmly studied the menu, ignoring the glances from nearby tables. He placed his order with Lucy, who approached gently, without condescension. "I'll have the lamb carpaccio," he said, "and the sommelier's recommended pairing." Lucy nodded, her voice soft. "Of course. Thank you, sir." When Gavin returned to the table, he slapped down the wine glass and smirked. "You sure you can handle the bill, my friend? Hate to see you wash dishes." Elijah looked up. "It won't be a problem." 20 minutes passed. Elijah dined in silence, savoring each bite with a patience that unnerved Gavin, who kept throwing glances from across the room, expecting him to disappear or make a scene. But Elijah never flinched. He just sat there, composed, patient, quiet. When he finished, he folded his napkin neatly and waited. Gavin returned with the bill, tossing it onto the table with a sarcastic grin. "Time's up. We've got people who actually belong here coming in." Elijah reached into his jacket and pulled out a slim leather case. He opened it slowly and placed something on the table, a platinum business card. Clean, heavy, unmistakably real. Gavin leaned in, curious, then froze. His fingers tightened around the edge of the table as he read the raised lettering. Elijah Cole, Executive Director, Cole Enterprises. Majority Stakeholder, Le Cheval Noir Group. Gavin's face turned pale. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Elijah stood, buttoned his jacket, and looked Gavin in the eye. "I'll be meeting with the general manager tomorrow morning," he said quietly. "We have some things to discuss, including how guests are treated when no one's watching." He walked out, leaving Gavin standing motionless, still holding the card like it might catch fire in his hands. From across the room, Omar gave a single slow nod. The next morning came with a quiet tension in the air. Staff arrived earlier than usual, whispering in corners, unsure if the rumors were true. Lucy had heard it from the bartender, who had overheard Omar speaking on the phone. Elijah Cole, the one who bought half the waterfront property last year. She had whispered to the dishwasher as they set up the silverware. "He owns this place now." Walked in looking like a backpacker, and Gavin treated him like dirt. By the time Gavin arrived, a dark cloud already hung over the dining room. He wore his usual crisp uniform, his tie straighter than ever, but his eyes were nervous, darting from face to face. He could feel the shift. Something wasn't right. At 10 sharp, the general manager, Helen, stepped into the building. She was rarely seen during mornings. Her presence alone signaled that this was an ordinary day. "Gavin," she said firmly, "upstairs. Now." He followed without protest. Upstairs, in the private lounge that overlooked the restaurant floor, Elijah was seated at a long glass table. Today, he wore a tailored charcoal gray blazer over a black turtleneck. Clean lines, no flash, but unmistakably powerful. He didn't stand when Gavin entered. He simply looked up and waited. Helen took the seat across from Elijah, visibly uneasy. "Mr. Cole," she began, "thank you for coming in. Again, we're honored to have you as our new partner." "Let's skip the formalities," Elijah said, his tone calm but sharp. "I'd like to discuss what happened yesterday." Gavin swallowed hard and stepped forward. "Mr. Cole, I want to sincerely apologize for any misunderstanding. I didn't recognize you, and—" "That's exactly the point," Elijah cut in. "You didn't recognize me, so you assumed I wasn't worthy of respect." Gavin shifted uncomfortably. "I was just trying to maintain the restaurant standards. We have a certain image and—" "No," Elijah interrupted again, his eyes narrowing. "You weren't protecting the restaurant. You were protecting your ego. You humiliated me because you could, because, in your eyes, I didn't look like money, and that made me invisible." Helen leaned forward, clearly troubled. "Mr. Cole, we pride ourselves on providing a world-class experience to every guest. This is unacceptable." "I agree," Elijah said. He turned his gaze fully on Gavin now. "You don't just lack empathy. You represent the kind of poison that ruins good institutions. Elitism masked as professionalism." Gavin's face had gone pale. "I've spent years building companies that are inclusive, that value people beyond how they dress, how they speak, or where they come from." Elijah continued. "This restaurant has potential, but not with people like him setting the tone." Helen nodded slowly. "Understood. Effective immediately. Gavin will be suspended pending review, and I will personally handle retraining of all front-of-house staff." Elijah stood. "Make sure it's not just about service language or memorizing wine pairings. Teach them humanity. Teach them to lead with kindness." Gavin opened his mouth, but no words came. "You made me feel like an inconvenience," Elijah said. "Like I didn't matter. I won't let another guest feel that way under this roof." With that, he turned and left the room. Downstairs, staff watched from behind the bar as Elijah walked through the dining room with quiet dignity. Lucy stepped aside respectfully. "Good morning, sir," she said softly. Elijah paused, then gave her a small nod. "Thank you for your kindness yesterday. It didn't go unnoticed." Omar, standing nearby, gave a respectful smile. "The staff will follow your lead, sir. You're welcome here. Always." As Elijah exited into the bright morning sun, the weight of what had transpired began to settle in. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about power. It was about dignity, about changing something, even if just a little. And sometimes the smallest moments, like asking for a table and being denied it, revealed the biggest truths. For the next few days, a quiet transformation settled over Le Cheval Noir. The whispers faded into focused silence. Staff arrived early, spoke more carefully, and carried a new awareness in every movement. Something had shifted, not just in management, but in spirit. Helen arranged daily sessions with the team, beginning each one with an apology on behalf of the restaurant. She spoke candidly, no longer shielding the truth. What happened last week was more than a mistake. It was a lesson, one that could have cost us more than our reputation. Elijah remained behind the scenes, rarely appearing on the restaurant floor, but his presence lingered in every corner. In the new staff guidelines pinned to the kitchen wall, in the rewritten guest protocol, and in the hearts of staff who now served each customer without judgment. Even Lucy noticed it. "I used to panic when someone walked in without a reservation," she said one morning while polishing glasses. "Now I remind myself, you never know who's walking through that door, or what they've been through to get here." Omar nodded quietly. Respect doesn't cost us anything, but not everyone adjusted with ease. Gavin's suspension had become the elephant in every room. Though he wasn't officially fired, he hadn't been seen since the meeting. Some said he was laying low, hoping things would blow over. Others believed he'd already left town. The truth was more complicated. In a modest apartment on the edge of the city, Gavin stared at his reflection in the mirror. The same uniform hung neatly behind him, still pressed and clean. But for the first time, he didn't recognize the man in the mirror. He remembered every word Elijah had said, every moment of humiliation, and as much as he tried to brush it off as an overreaction, the truth had taken root. He had become someone he once promised himself he'd never be, a man who judged others to make himself feel significant. 3 days later, Elijah returned to the restaurant, not as a guest, not as a boss, but to speak to the team. They gathered before opening hours, dressed in uniform, standing shoulder to shoulder like students awaiting a final exam. Gavin was there too. He had requested to attend, and Helen had agreed on the condition that he remain silent unless spoken to. Elijah stepped forward, his presence calm but commanding. "I didn't come here today to remind anyone of what went wrong," he began. "You already know that. I came to talk about what happens now." He looked around the room, pausing on each face. "I grew up scrubbing dishes in places like this. Back then, no one noticed me unless I made a mistake. I learned to listen more than I spoke, and I watched how easily people in power forgot what it meant to serve others. Some heads lowered. Others stood straighter. This restaurant doesn't need to be perfect, but it does need to be fair. Every guest, every stranger, every quiet soul who walks through that door deserves dignity, whether they're wearing a suit or an old jacket." He paused. The room was still. Success built on exclusion is failure in disguise. From today forward, this restaurant will lead differently, with grace, with humility, with humanity. He turned slightly toward Helen, giving a small nod of appreciation. Then, unexpectedly, Elijah looked directly at Gavin. "I didn't ask for him to be fired," Elijah said to the group. "He made a mistake, one that exposed a deeper flaw. But mistakes, if faced with honesty, can become doors." Gavin looked stunned. "I'll leave it to management to decide his future." Elijah added, "But I believe in second chances, earned, not given." Gavin stepped forward slightly, voice hoarse. "Mr. Cole," he began, struggled with the words. "I was wrong. Not just with you, with so many others. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want to try again, as someone better." Elijah studied him for a long, uncomfortable moment. Then he nodded just once. "Then start by showing others what respect looks like, especially when no one's watching." By evening, the restaurant was open again. The tables were full. The food flowed. And in one quiet corner, a man in worn shoes was seated, enjoying a glass of wine. Not a single staff member hesitated to serve him, because now they all understood. Kindness is not a courtesy. It's the standard. The story didn't stay inside Le Cheval Noir for long. It started small, just murmurs from regular patrons who had sensed something had changed. Then came a local food blogger who had overheard Lucy telling a colleague about Elijah's speech. She wrote a short piece titled, "The Man in the Hoodie Who Owns the Finest Table in Town." Within 24 hours, it went viral. By the end of the week, national headlines had picked it up. Restaurant owner tests the staff, and one waiter fails miserably. The hidden billionaire who exposed class discrimination with a simple meal. What happens when you judge a book by its jacket? People flooded the restaurant's online reviews, not with critiques about food or service, but reflections on the story itself. Some wrote about times they'd been dismissed for not looking the part. Others praised Elijah's dignity. Parents shared the article with their teens. Teachers used it as a classroom discussion. A quiet storm of self-reflection had been unleashed. Inside the restaurant, business boomed. But something deeper was changing, too. New staff orientation now included a workshop called Invisible Guests, a program Elijah funded personally, designed to train hospitality workers to confront their unconscious biases. Formerly overlooked team members were being promoted, their kindness and reliability now recognized as leadership qualities. And then came the invitation. A local university school of ethics and leadership requested Elijah to speak at their annual summit. At first, he declined, but after some thought and a letter from a first-year student who had been homeless 2 years earlier and dreamed of becoming a chef, he changed his mind. The auditorium was packed. Students, faculty, reporters. Some had come for the viral headline, others for the man himself. Elijah took the stage without notes, wearing the same jacket he had worn on that first day inside Le Cheval Noir. The audience noticed. They leaned forward. He spoke slowly, plainly. I was never trying to test anyone. I just wanted a meal. But what happened that day reminded me that we're still building a world that values appearances over humanity. He paused, letting the words breathe. People think privilege is obvious, that it walks in wearing gold watches and Italian shoes. But privilege, real privilege, is not needing to prove your worth before you're treated like a person. He looked out across the crowd, students holding notebooks and phones in the air. I've built companies. I've made money. But the thing I'm most proud of is walking into a room without needing to announce who I am. A long silence followed, then thunderous applause. Back at the restaurant that evening, Gavin was quietly clearing a table when a couple stopped him. "Weren't you the waiter from the story?" the woman asked, her tone curious but kind. He hesitated. "Yes, ma'am. I was." She didn't judge him. She simply smiled. "We all need wake-up calls sometimes. You're still here. That says something." Gavin nodded, deeply humbled. "I'm trying to be better. Every shift." That night, after the restaurant had closed and the last wine glass had been polished, Elijah walked through the kitchen one final time. Lucy was still finishing side work. Omar was tallying the closing receipts. Elijah turned to them, his voice soft but firm. "Kindness isn't what you do when someone's watching. It's what you carry with you, even when they're not." Lucy smiled. "It's become part of this place now. You can feel it." Elijah looked around one last time. The restaurant he once couldn't enter without being judged was now something else entirely. A reminder, a mirror, a beginning. Part 5, Epilogue. Months passed. The buzz around Elijah's story eventually faded from headlines, replaced by the next viral sensation. But the impact he left behind at Le Cheval Noir in the city and in the lives he touched didn't disappear. The restaurant had changed, not in aesthetic or prestige, but in soul. Guests still came dressed in designer coats and cufflinks, but now they sat beside people in denim jackets and sneakers, and no one questioned who belonged. Staff didn't just serve, they listened, they welcomed. They remembered faces not by outfits, but by stories. The invisible guests training Elijah had implemented grew beyond the restaurant. Hospitality schools invited his team to speak. Boutique hotels began their own inclusion programs inspired by the model. Even other luxury restaurants reached out for guidance. And through it all, Elijah never chased the spotlight. He declined most interviews. He wasn't interested in being celebrated, only in leaving something better than he found it. One quiet afternoon, long after the lunch crowd had left, Elijah sat alone at his usual table. Table 12, the very spot Gavin had once forced him into like an afterthought. He stirred a cup of black coffee, watching the soft rain streak down the tall windows. Across the room, Gavin was setting cutlery for the dinner shift. His posture was different now, more grounded, less performative. His movements were no longer rushed. He didn't flinch when someone entered without a reservation, nor did he glance at their shoes. Elijah watched him quietly. After a moment, Gavin walked over. There was no stiffness in his approach, just a genuine calm. "May I?" he asked. Elijah gestured to the seat across from him. Gavin sat. "I've been wanting to say something," he began. "I've apologized for what I did that day, but I don't think I ever told you what came after." Elijah said nothing, just listened. Gavin continued. "I started volunteering at a shelter downtown. Every Saturday, I talked to the people I used to ignore. A few weeks ago, I served lunch to a man wearing the same jacket you wore when you came in here, and I realized I would have pushed him away too, just like I did to you." His voice cracked. "You showed me who I really was. Not through revenge, not by yelling, but by staying kind when I didn't deserve it." Elijah set his coffee down. "I didn't want to punish you, Gavin," he said. "I wanted you to see." "I did," Gavin whispered. "I see it now." They sat in silence for a while. Rain tapped against the windows, soft and rhythmic. Then Elijah smiled, not wide, but warm, the kind of smile that signaled something had finally come full circle. "You're still here," Elijah said. "That means you didn't run." "I wanted to," Gavin admitted, "but I needed to stay." Elijah stood, leaving a generous tip beneath his cup, as he always did. "Then keep staying. Keep doing the hard work. Change doesn't need applause. It just needs consistency." Outside, the sky was clearing. The storm had passed. As Elijah walked down the street, hands in his pockets, coat flapping in the wind, he passed a man sitting on a bench. The man was scruffy, tired-looking, with a backpack and old sneakers. No one noticed him. No one looked twice. But Elijah did. He paused, reached into his coat pocket, and handed the man a business card. "If you ever need a meal," he said, "ask for table 12. The man stared at the card, confused. "What is this?" Elijah gave a gentle smile. "A beginning." He walked on. And just like that, the story started again, not with wealth, not with power, but with a seat at the table.